我这个养子本来就不是儿子，他无同意改取关系，我拿到登报再改取。
才得知爸爸已经把公司都已经转到姐姐名下了。
啊，对。
30 years ago, a billionaire, perhaps moved by pure kindness or by that impulse to save the world one child at a time, decided to adopt a poor boy. And from that moment on, the boy grew up believing he was the official heir to the clan. He didn't just believe it, he was absolutely certain. In his mind, all of his adoptive father's assets were merely temporarily under someone else's name and would, inevitably, one day pass into his hands. But life has a special talent for shattering expectations. Recently, he found out that his father had transferred the company into the name of his biological daughter. And, as if that wasn't enough to completely destroy his mental castle, the father even proposed a friendly agreement: $2 million to end, once and for all, the 30-year father-son relationship. An emotional severance contract, so to speak. Zheng Zhou, now 35 years old, had left home 3 years earlier after an argument swearing he would build a brilliant career, worthy of applause, so that his father would regret underestimating him. During that time, he managed to save 70,000 yuan through his own efforts, an achievement that, for him, was headline-worthy. So, he decided to invest in the simple life dream. He built a house in the countryside, but not just any house, a luxurious mansion. The catch? By the end, he was 200,000 in debt. But for him, this wasn't a problem. Well, my father's a millionaire. What's 200,000 to someone with hundreds of millions? He thought. That's the kind of optimism that only exists when the money belongs to someone else. While promising his creditors he'd pay everything within 3 days, he was hit with a bombshell. His father wanted to cut ties. Shocked, he rushed to check the facts and discovered that the company was already officially in his sister's name. In other words, not only was he out of the company, but also out of the circle of trust. Indignant, he rushed back to Changsha to understand why his father was being so cruel. On the other side, Zheng Jishu, the adoptive father, calmly explained that, although not his biological son, he had treated him as such for 30 years, the same level of care, the same attention as his daughter. The problem was that, throughout all this time, Zheng Zhou kept his distance. He didn't show up for holidays, didn't get involved with the family, and seemed to have a knack for disappearing when he didn't need anything. 3 decades earlier, Zheng Jishu had found the boy in a poor village. His biological parents were sick and unable to work. Moved by the situation, he adopted the youngest child. He took care of him, bought him a car, bought him a house, and even agreed to support his 2 children for 20 years after one of the baby's mothers passed away. But despite all this, Zheng Zhou only remembered he had parents when he needed money, treating his adoptive father like an ATM that never closes. Tired, the father decided to end the bond, but offered $2 million to ensure his grandchildren wouldn't be in need until they reached adulthood. For the adopted son, however, the problem wasn't the offer, it was the lack of respect he felt. At 14, he dropped out of school and went to work in the family factory, but got into fights and found it humiliating to hold basic positions. The breaking point came when he was assaulted by co-workers and his father didn't take his side. To him, that was proof he had never been seen as the true heir. From then on, he never returned home. He tried to start his own business but only piled up debt. And when he finally considered asking for help, he discovered the company was in his sister's name and his father wanted a permanent break. In the father's view, already nearing 60 and thinking about retirement, it was only natural to pass the company to someone committed, and the daughter had been working there since graduation. The adopted son, on the other hand, had never been involved in the business. To Zheng Zhou, that was favoritism. To the father, it was just business logic. And the adoptive mother, despite always trying to balance treatment between the two, knew that the adopted son had never overcome the emotional barrier of having no blood ties. The father summed it up. Zheng Zhou is jealous, lazy, and complacent. He only thinks about getting money to live in the countryside, as if life were an eternal holiday paid for by someone else. Tired of waiting for change, he decided to end it. Before hearing all this, Zheng Zhou believed it was only a matter of preference for the sister. But deep down, the father wanted him to be independent, to take on responsibilities as a man, a husband, and a father. Jung Jo acknowledged that he wasn't capable of running the company and admitted that his motivation had always been to prove he was important to his father, not necessarily to inherit the assets. Even so, he accepted the break. The mother tried to mediate, but the father, disappointed, wouldn't talk. As he left, Jung Jo made a public promise. Even without the bond, he would never forget the 30 years of upbringing and would be there if needed. When the reporter brought this message to the father, his tone softened. He said he had never truly abandoned the adopted son, but wanted to see him mature and take real responsibility. In the end, despite having no blood ties, Jung Jishu had invested greatly in him, hoping to see him as a source of pride. But without communication and involvement, the relationship collapsed. The father still hopes he learns the lesson. In a family, you can't live forever as a guest in a 5-star hotel. There comes a time when you have to stop ordering room service and start washing your own dishes. This story isn't just about a father and an adopted son cutting ties. It's about expectations, responsibilities, and that old illusion that family bonds with or without blood are unbreakable, no matter what. Jung Jo had everything: a house, a car, support, and even the guarantee that his children would be taken care of. But he confused being welcomed with having an automatic right to everything. He wanted the title of heir, but not the weight that comes with it. He wanted his father's respect, but without giving any reason to be respected. And here's the curious part. For 30 years, he watched his father build an empire. He could have learned the ropes. He could have gotten involved. He could have shown he deserved to be there. But he chose to keep his distance. And when he finally decided to prove his worth, his grand achievement was building a mansion in the countryside with borrowed money. Yeah, not exactly the resume of a successor, is it? The father, on the other hand, also made a mistake. He spent 3 decades trying to balance affection and responsibility, but never managed to break through the emotional barrier his son had put up between them. And when he realized it, he saw he was about to hand over everything he had worked for to someone who never cared to understand the business. That's when he hit the brakes. And honestly, this isn't about favoritism toward the daughter. It's about trusting what you've built to someone who is truly willing to keep it standing. Because in the end, inheritance isn't just money. It's values, commitment, history. And if a person doesn't inherit those, the rest just turns into a bank account that vanishes quickly. The most ironic part is that, in his own words, Jung Jo says he didn't want the assets. He wanted to prove he was important to his father. But if your importance depends on a signed piece of paper, maybe it never really existed at all. And here's the hard truth that many people don't like to hear. Family is not a lifetime contract. If you don't nurture it, if you don't participate, if you only show up to ask for something, one day, the door will close. And when it does, there's no point in blaming only the other side. Now, I want to hear from you. In your opinion, was the father right to cut ties after everything he had done for him? Or, even with all the mistakes, should the 30-year bond have mattered more? Leave your comment below, because this is the kind of situation where everyone sees justice in a different way.